After e4, c5, knight f3, d6, we play the Moscow with bishop e5, and black is now playing knight to d7. This is the main move. We have seen this extensively in the past, we've seen a lot, but we need to see some stuff before we finally close this saga forever. We play d4, and after pawn takes and queen takes, let's see a few moves here. Let's start with this one. Knight to f6 now. Now, as we've seen in the past, we have to play knight c3, g6, and now immediately attack the bishop, the knight with the bishop in g5, bishop to g7, long castle. And now, the only thing we've seen in the past was black castling now, and make sure you watch the other videos before we watch this one. A move that needs to be seen now is a6, attacking the bishop immediately. Now here you simply take the bishop. If black takes back with the queen, for example, you simply play e5. And that's a very strong attack. You're attacking the knight. This pawn can't really take this one. Okay, let's make an example. If the knight just retreats, goes to g8, for example, you play e6. And now, you got an attack on the bishop. If the bishop takes your queen, then you can take this queen with check. And then you can recapture the piece. And basically you wrap a piece. If instead, well, the black player takes this one, but then you can take in g7, you're trapping the rook, so it's game over. So let's go back here. After e5, we know what we're threatening. And it's not like a move like knight h5 changes anything. You might argue that the move e6 now doesn't work because the knight's protecting the bishop. In fact, now you gotta play knight to d5, threatening knight b6, making a fork. And position already evaluated as if white was almost was more than up a piece already. This is just inevitable. Also, you got double attack on the pawn in e7. So if our opponent tries to, let's say, take this pawn, and basically after the knight goes to b6, our opponent can swap everything, save the rook or something. You just play knight e5, and it's like you're attacking a million squares around the opponent's area. So after even, let's say, trades, you can just take, knight attacking the rook. You also got triple pressure on the square. You also threatening knight f6, an attack on the queen. I mean, the position evaluated +6 or something at this point. So back in this position, after the queen takes and we play e5, what if black just takes the pawn, tries to swap pieces? That doesn't help because you simply play queen b6. And you're completely winning because you're winning the opponent queen. This queen has nowhere to go where she can be safe. You might argue, what about queen e6 or queen c6, whatever? That will be leaving d8 checkmate available. Okay, you might argue, what about blocking? Well, you got enough pieces here, as you can tell. So back in this position, straight after taking the knight in d7, what if black takes with the bishop? This seems more reasonable. Okay, well, you still play e5. That's the funny thing. And now, again, what if the knight, let's say, moves? Let's say knight h5. Okay, well, knight to d5. And we're simply threatening to take the pawn in e7, and that's going to be an absolute disaster. You threaten to take maybe with the knight, maybe with the bishop. Either way, it's an absolute disaster. This cannot be stopped in any way. e6 cannot be played because the queen will fall. A move like f6 appears to maybe create some trouble. Or maybe you may wonder, what about pawn takes? And then when we take back, f6 is a fork. Pawn taking is not good because then you just take back again. Position is crazy. There's a crazy valuation. f6 doesn't fork anything simply because queen c4. Now, so here you threaten knight c7 with the arrival on f7. So I'll move like rook c8 with an attack on the queen. You're going to make check and then you're going to make a checkmate. So in this position, after the bishop takes and we play e5 and the knight goes to h5, we play knight d5. What about f6 now? Okay, take. And when you get taken back, rook to e1. The development is complete. And now our opponent has to move king f8, knight to b6 now, attacks the rook. And none of this can just be stopped. Also because you're going to play queen check, even if the rook moves. So what if black tries to win some material in exchange? Taking our bishop. We're down a bishop at the moment, but you still make a check. And the king will have to move. You can't block because we got so much attack thanks to the rook as well. King moves, now queen to d5 check. We're going to close the line here because it's impossible to stop. The king will have to go back to f8. But now you can take this one and you take it from here. It's a joke. So back in this position, we're looking at the variation where the bishop takes back, and now we play e5. What if our opponent doesn't move the knight, but rather takes the pawn? However, one last line actually very quickly. What if knight to g8 now? We don't have that e6 trick anymore because we're just losing the queen for almost nothing. Here you go on with rook h to e1, and that's going to be it. There's no coming back already. Too much attack over the square f6. If black attacks us, you just play bishop f6. Taking is a suicide. I mean, it's completely over already. There is nothing else to do. If the king just moves away from the strong file of the rook, you're just gonna take, and then you can push the pawn. You can also take. You got discover checks and so on. So for the last time, let's return to this position. Bishop takes and pawn takes. You might argue, okay, black will want to get rid of all of those problems and just take the pawn. Fair enough. Okay, take back. And now, if black plays bishop to c6, we have a thematic pattern here. When we take the bishop, obviously this is really bad because after take, blah, 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 take, knight f7 check wins the exchange, and there's no reason to play like that for our opponent. So instead of that, let's play. Also, we have so much attack. We've got 3 pieces attacking this square. So if black just plays a move like e6 or some stupid move like that, remember that after taking and then taking, we're going to have loads of attack here. We're going to win material. So in this position, what if black plays this move, which I've encountered myself recently in a game, and I needed to know what to do. So bishop e6 is an interesting move, puts more protection over f7, invites the trades, and then eventually our opponent will conclude the game with a bishop pair. So we got to be careful what to do here. You got to play queen a4. Now here this is check, and there's an attack on the queen. So our opponent's got limited options here. One of them, obviously, will be, well, b5 is stupid because rook check. You take the queen with check, so that doesn't work. If black blocks with the bishop, queen to b3, threatening mate in f7. And it's not like you can stop it. Like, let's say if you play e6, then simply knight takes d7 is the best move. Knight can't take back because it's pinned, and queen can't take back because of the rook. Game over. So instead of e6, what if... I mean, if black castle, that also doesn't work because you're just going to take this knight. And whichever way you get taken back, you got double attack on this bishop, right? That's how amazing the development and how smooth the development of the white player is to allow you such tactics. So in this position, after the check, bishop cannot block. What about knight blocking? Does that change anything? Okay, rook h to e1 comes now. And after f6, looks like this is a fork. However, we don't care, we're just taking g6, and now that comes with an attack on this bishop. If, for example, if pawn takes, then just rook takes, completely winning position. So if pawn takes the knight, then you take this one, and you might argue our opponent can also take the bishop. We're losing here, but no, because you're going to play knight d5, finalizing the attack over the square e7. This cannot be protected with bishop to f6, because when you take, then this knight is still pinned, right? So bishop to f8 instead doesn't really change anything. You're still going to play knight f6. You got triple attack over this knight. King could be moving to f7 with an attack on the rook, but it doesn't matter. You're just going to take this rook, the knight, and yeah, nothing else to do for black. If he really wants to try and fight for material, this move is ridiculous because you're going to play queen c4 and checkmate next move, as you can see. And back in this position, after f6, we said we're going to play knight takes in g6. What if our opponent first attacks our queen, b5, and now we no longer are pinning this knight, and our piece is under attack, the other piece is under attack, this piece is under attack, there's 3 pieces hanging. Well, okay, queen e4, attacking this bishop. And now same thing, if black takes the knight, then we take this bishop, and when we lose our other bishop, then knight to e4 now threatens knight d6 with queen f7 mate. It's gonna be game over very soon. And last but not least, let me just make a quick mention that in this position, it's not like black can retreat the bishop or something like that and still keep, you see, there's 2 white pieces hanging, because now you can take this one, and it's forced to take, queen is forced to take a rook check, and king moves, and then you got this one, and yeah. So let's take this from the start. Let's look at something new. So after this moves, d4, take, a6 straight away. What to do? As we know from previous videos, we have to take. And after bishop takes back, castle. So in this position, the novelty that has to be seen is h6. This prevents bishop g5 idea. So black wants to be able to play knight f6 without running into bishop g5. Not that we were necessarily planning to, but anyway, h6 now. What to do? Okay, rook to d1, and after knight f6, c4 by white. Okay, bishop c4. This is now possible. White. I mean, we know that, as we remember from previous videos, we know you want to play bishop g5, you want to take this knight, put more pressure on the weak d6 pawn, or simply stop our opponent from being able to castle anywhere. We've talked about that a lot. Knight to c3 comes now, and after e5 by black, queen to e3. So how is it that our position is much better than our opponent? It's because of the weak d6 pawn that will be taken no matter what. It can never advance. Knight to g4 attacking the queen, for example. Let's look at this move. We're going to look at 3 different ideas. One of them, knight to g4 with an attack on the queen. Well, okay, before we look at that, what about a bishop e7? That's obviously stupid because you're just going to win the pawn in e5 for free, right? So this pawn is pinned. Don't forget that we're attacking this pawn. So 2 ways to protect it would be queen c7 and knight g4. So knight g4, you play queen e2. Save the queen first of all. And now, if our opponent does play bishop e7, the knight is still protecting this pawn, then you simply attack the knight. The knight will have to move, and then you can play knight takes pawn in e5. What if black plays this move? Very interesting move. They played it against me. So, well, obviously here you can just take the knight for free. Because after take back, it's kind of scary. But after you take this pawn, you got double attack here. There's nothing. Our opponent doesn't have anything. And remember, the crucial reason is that there's a bishop in e7. If there was no bishop in e7, black would have been able to reach this square, and this square would have been terrifying. So in this position, after queen e2, what about rook to c8? Just normal developing move. Instead of bishop e7, preserving the queen on this diagonal. This is more interesting. You play h3, and now after h5, you don't take this knight, because then you're in trouble. Pawn takes back, you gotta move the knight, the queen is coming down. So you don't want to do that. b3 by white. Okay, what is left to do? There's not many moves available here. b5 can't be played. Bishop e7 will just, run into us winning this knight. So what about rook c7? Preparing the rook to be reaching central fires in case and defend the pawn. So that's just an example. So you play a4, and after g6 by black, you play b4. That's how zugzwangish this position is. There's nothing else but to move the side pawns. Bishop to g7, developing. Okay, c5, exploiting the pin here. Rook to d7, the rook is getting into the game. b5. So that was how, this is just a sample of how compromised the game already was, and how some sample moves. There's not a good chance that these exact moves will happen. But if you remember the motives, then you're going to force the replies from your opponent, and hopefully you will have won already before we even get to this move. So in this position, knight g4 idea just doesn't work, right? What about queen to c7? Defending the pawn, unpinning the d6 pawn. Fine, you play a4. That's how you play it. Bishop e7. Knight to h4. That's the plan you're going to make. You want to go to f5, reaching glory. Bishop to d7 by black has to stop the knight f5 plan. The knight is just too strong. b3. These are the same moves you always play. Castle. Knight f5. Attacking the bishop. Bishop takes, pawn takes. That's fine. We got a good diagonal on the opponent king side. Rook 8 to d8. Remember how weak our opponent is for the simple fact that he can never push the d pawn. Knight to d5. This is the type of knight that when it gets taken, you're going to take back with the rook, still applying pressure on this square. Bishop to g5, attacking the queen and forcing a trade with our future very strong bishop. That's fine. Queen to g3. And now we're going to be taking this bishop. If the bishop moves away, you can take this pawn in h6. So if the bishop take. Now, how do we capitalize this boring endgame? Well, we're completely winning, but let's make sure we play accurately. f6, just to prevent f6 from white. Rook c to d1. beginning to put pressure on this backward pawn, which is the very target we've always had in mind since the beginning of the game. Rook f7. Okay, queen d3, finalizing the pressure on that square. What about rook d7? Well, c5. That will settle it. King f7. How to continue this? Just take. Your upper pawn is going to be winning. Rook takes. Pawn takes with an attack on the queen. Queen d7. That's fine. Queen check. The king can't really go, let's say, to e8 because that allows you to infiltrate. So king f8 kind of has to happen. Queen e6, inviting the trade. We're going to have two passed pawns. And there is nothing else to do for our opponent. If he moves the queen away, we got access to e7, right? So he has to accept this. Okay, take back. King e8 to avoid the fork of e7. That would have been embarrassing. f4. And if we get to play f5, that would be just a joke. So what about pawn takes? King f2. That's it. And then slowly, but we're going to go and help the pawns to promote. These two pawns will never be touched from that square. From those squares. King f2. What about g5? Defending the pawn. Okay, king f3. f5 by black. It looks like he stops access to basically everywhere. Best move by white now is a5. It's basically zugzwang. We're just going to wait for our play. Oh, black can't push anything. If you push this pawn, we take this one. If we push this one, then we just, I don't know, make another move, whatever. Black is running out of moves. So let's take this from the start and let's do the last recap before we can close this. So d6, check, knight d7, d4. So take. And now the immediate attack on the bishop. As we know, we have to take, and after bishop takes back, castle. So when black doesn't play h6, obviously, it just plays the regular knight f6 move. What needs to be seen here is the novelty is basically, so as we know, we play rook e1, and after g6 to develop the fianchetto bishop, knight c3, bishop g7. It all looks, we've seen this stuff before, e5 comes straight away. When the pawn takes, remember, go and watch all the other videos if you want to know how to battle the specific Sicilian with the Moscow. Here I'm giving the novelty. So after knight takes and castle, these are all best moves by the both players. Now here we have to take this bishop, as we remember, and we went through queen takes in the past. And then take, blah blah blah, rook e7. That was more or less how the game went. You have to play accurate. In this game, we're going to go through knight takes back. What to do now? There's an attack on the queen. Okay, queen to b4. Now let's look at a couple of ideas and then we're going to close this video. e6 by black is really bad. It stops the influence of the rook, but like, this pawn is not poisoned, right? Queen b7, if rook attacks you, then queen a6. It's just, they're not poisoned at all. And then you're going to have literally 3 connected passed pawns and you're going to win it like that. In this position then, instead of e6, what about, I don't know, rook e8 by black? This is to stop, the arrival of our pieces into the 7th rank, and then, so what about rook e8? Okay, bishop g5. Finalizing the pressure on that square. Well, what about knight f6? Rook a to d1. Look how smooth the development is. Queen to c7, defending the pawn, saving the queen. Bishop f4 attacks the queen. And when the queen moves away, we can win a crucial pawn in e7. What if instead the queen sticks around and black plays more aggressive? e5. Fine, play bishop g5. And that's it. h6, attacking the bishop. What intention do we have? We just want to take, because after take back, knight to d5 wins the game. It's a fork, you're winning a piece. What if queen to c6 still defends the bishop? Fair enough, you play c4. So the game is not over yet. Now, if the knight retreats if the bishop retreats to g7, then you got knight e7 winning the exchange. It's a crucial moment to win the exchange. If instead our opponent plays rook a to c8 to reinforce the attack over this pawn, you simply play b3 and that's it. Remember, bishop g7 is not possible. But what about bishop g5 to save it from the attack of the knight? And then black is able to move the queen a little bit more freely. You play a4. We've seen this pyramid, reverse pyramid already. It happens all the time. Queen to c5, for example, you just play take. You're completely winning this endgame. You have been for a while. You're going to play f4. This wins the game. The bishop can't go to f6. h4, you can just attack it again, and you've got enough pressure here to secure the win in the endgame.